Leadership isn't just about having the answers. It's about knowing when to ask the right questions. It's about knowing when to listen deeply, when to gather the scattered thoughts, concerns, and aspirations of your team, and then, when the time comes, knowing how to make the call. A leader's strength lies not just in deciding, but in deciding with purpose and deciding at the right moment. I learned this lesson the hard way. Early in my leadership journey, I made the mistake of thinking that in order to be a good leader, I had to include everyone's voice in every single decision. It was a thought process based on the models of leadership that I saw around me and my internal rejection of what I perceived to be heavy-handed leadership. I became obsessed with gathering input, as though the more opinions I collected, the clearer the path would become. The result? Endless meetings, an endless whirlpool of feedback, and ultimately no movement at all. The project stagnated, not because we lacked ideas or resources, but because I failed to take all the various inputs and make a decision. I'd fallen into the trap of over-consulting. I thought leadership meant to be inclusive, ensuring that everyone felt heard. What I didn't realize was that leading also meant knowing when to stop and take action. Too much feedback, too many voices can cloud judgment and leave a leader paralyzed by indecision. Listening is a cornerstone of good leadership. It's not just about hearing the words, it's about understanding them. But at some point, listening must give way to decisiveness. A leader must be able to sift through the input, acknowledge the perspectives, and then say, this is the path we'll take. For a leader, the tension is between consultation and action, and it's constant. There are moments when you need to step back, gather your thoughts, ask the hard questions, and seek the best answers. But there comes a time when that listening period must close. The path forward needs to be clear, and it's your job to lead the way. Decisiveness is not the opposite of collaboration. It's the necessary partner for it. And I know what it's like to feel the weight of indecision. To know that a decision needs to be made, but to hesitate out of fear of making the wrong choice. But leadership demands the courage to decide even when the answers aren't perfect, even when not everyone agrees. The more you overconsult, the less you lead, and the more you delay, the more you risk losing the momentum your team needs to stay engaged. There is danger in overconsulting, just as there is danger in deciding too quickly without gathering any input. I've also seen leaders rush to judgment, making decisions without the feedback that could have steered them in a better direction. The right balance is essential. Too much time spent listening can lead to stagnation, and too little can result in blind decisions that alienate the team. There's a particular kind of decisiveness that can quietly alienate a team, where the rush to act outpaces the need to listen. It's easy to fall into the trap of moving too swiftly, believing that speed is synonymous with strength. But when decisions are made without the full weight of collective input, the cracks start to show. Confidence in a decision is important, but it becomes hollow when it's not anchored in collaboration. It's not enough to make a call. Leaders must ensure that every voice feels heard and valued. When people's insights are ignored, trust evaporates and the energy that once drove the team begins to dissipate. The lesson is clear. Decisiveness without inclusion doesn't unite, it divides. The trick is knowing when to transition from listening to deciding. When to say, I've gathered enough input, now it's time to lead. If you stay in the feedback loop too long, you risk losing sight of your role as a decider. Now, if you move too quickly without enough input, you risk alienating those whose support you need. Once the decision is made, your job isn't finished. Communicating is the bridge that turns a decision into action. It's not just about saying, this is what we're doing. It's about helping people understand why you've made the choice, how it fits into the larger vision, and what steps will come next. Decisions in their truest sense aren't the sole property of any one person. They belong to the team. The role of a leader is to synthesize the diverse perspectives and then distill them into a single actionable choice. But the strength of that decision lies in how collectively it's understood. When a decision is made, it should never feel like a decree from above. Instead, it should feel like the culmination of a shared journey. That's why clarity in communication is essential. Not just stating what's being decided, but explaining why that choice was made. Acknowledging the input that guided the decision gives it context, strengthening the trust that it wasn't just a leader's will, but a unified path forward. When people understand the why behind a decision, they're much more likely to support it. Even if it's a decision they didn't entirely agree with, clarity about the reasoning builds trust. This transparency is what enables people to see the decision as part of a bigger shared vision, something they can buy into, even if they didn't get their preferred option. But the work doesn't end once the decision is made. Listening and adapting is an ongoing process. Once the decision is in motion, the feedback doesn't stop. Leaders need to keep their ears open for how the decision is being received, whether it's having the intended impact, and whether adjustments need to be made along the way. The best leaders don't just make decisions. They make decisions and adapt based on how those decisions are playing out. If you've listened to your team's feedback, decided on the course of action, and communicated that decision clearly, you'll have created a dynamic space where everyone feels their voice matters. And this in turn sets the stage for more honest feedback and continuous improvement. In the end, leadership is not about making decisions in isolation. It's about finding the balance between listening and deciding, between acting and communicating, with transparency and clarity. It is a process that requires constant reflection, openness to feedback, and the courage to move forward even when not all the answers are clear. But when you get it right, when you listen deeply, decide decisively, and communicate clearly, you empower your team and build a culture of trust, collaboration, and shared purpose.